Alright, YouTube, so we're back, of course, here to talk about Hironobu Sakaguchi, somebody we don't talk about a lot on the channel, mostly because he's not actually a part of Square Enix anymore, and hasn't been for a very long time. In fact, he's actually not been a part of Square longer than he ever was as of this year, because he was with Square from 83 to 2003, so, give or take however, weeks, months, whatever, pretty much exactly 20 years, and obviously 2003 was 21 years ago. But the relationship between Sakaguchi and Square Enix is kind of changing going forward, at least as of right now, because they're helping bring his game Fantasian to PC and consoles, which was a mobile-only game, and I think exclusive to iPhone, if I'm not mistaken. Which the game does look great, by the way. I just had never heard of it until, I believe, Summer Game Fest, where they announced this newer version of the game. So this version that Square Enix is working on, or going to release, whatever, I think goes up to 4K. They're going to add voice acting. I don't know if there's any other additional content. I know there's a harder difficulty. It's really cool to see, man, because you have the Final Fantasy creator and Sakaguchi, collabing with Square Enix again after more than 2 decades. Even if it's just them helping bring his game to, PC and consoles, it's still really cool to see after all this time. But that game's not really the focus of the video. I do hope success for Sakaguchi and Mistwalker. I love the guy. He created one of my favorite franchises ever, right? But within this interview that he did with Jason Schreier and Bloomberg, he actually talked about how he doesn't really want to come back to Final Fantasy at all, or some of his older franchises in general, like Lost Odyssey and Blue Dragon. What's next then? Sakaguchi said that despite the newfound partnership, he has no interest in revisiting Final Fantasy or any of his old franchises, in part because he's switched to a consumer rather than a creator, and doesn't want a glimpse at how the sausage is made. If I take on the Final Fantasy brand again, I don't know if I'll be able to genuinely enjoy Final Fantasy XIV as much, he said. Which, by the way, it's a pretty well-known thing that Sakaguchi is a major fan of Final Fantasy XIV. He plays it a lot. In fact, they say in this interview that he was playing it minutes before they conducted the interview. But also that whenever he needs to be at a meeting or something for Mistwalker, they will sometimes have to get a hold of him within Final Fantasy XIV because he's probably not looking at his phone and shit. It's crazy. I mean, I get it as a gamer, dude. I respect the grind. But yeah, him not wanting to come back to the Final Fantasy franchise does kind of suck, and I get it. He wants to be a consumer, not a creator these days when it comes to Final Fantasy. And I can understand how, if he was helping make the games, he might not enjoy them as much, right? Because you're seeing the process, but the behind the scenes, you already know what's going to happen, so you can't. It's not as fun to sit down and play something that you already know what's going to happen, right? I guess if that makes any sense. And it sort of makes sense too, because at this point, he's not been a part of Square, as we talked about previously, for quite a long time. In fact, he's actually been with Mistwalker since 2004, so he's been with his studio for as long as he was with Square initially, right? 20 years. So it kind of makes sense. He stepped away from the franchise a long time ago, and kind of intentionally, as he talks about in this interview, where he didn't want to influence the franchise now, since that's kind of why he's had kind of sort of a rocky relationship and kind of distant with Square Enix over the years, because he didn't want to really be a part of the franchise in any capacity at all. So I understand what he's saying and kind of his point of view and stuff, but I do think that it kind of sucks to not have him be a part of Square Enix in some capacity these days. Especially since we're in this remake remaster era, and kind of have been with Square Enix for a little while, but with the Final Fantasy franchise, right? With the Pixel remasters, the 7 remake project, the rumored Tactics remaster, the Final Fantasy 9 remake as well. Those are things that he could be a part of. That'd be kind of cool, especially because I know for a while, or maybe even still to this day, Final Fantasy 9 was Sakaguchi's favorite Final Fantasy, right? Because that's kind of in his mind what he envisioned for the Final Fantasy franchise, and to him, Final Fantasy 9 achieved what a Final Fantasy game should be. These days, 14 might be his favorite, but I know for a long time, 9 was, and it'd be kind of cool to have Sakaguchi working on the remake of 9, even if it is just a visual thing or whatever. I think it'd be kind of cool to have, after all this time, Sakaguchi come back and help with a Final Fantasy game, right? Final Fantasy 17, just as an example, whoever would be making that, whether that's Hamaguchi or Yoshida or whoever's helming the project, just having Sakaguchi there, the creator of Final Fantasy, is helping make the new Final Fantasy game. I think that'd be kind of cool, even if it's just a producer role or some shit. Anyways, they go on to say, Sakaguchi also said he has no interest in bringing older games such as Lost Odyssey and Blue Dragon to modern platforms, despite recent rumors suggesting otherwise. He does want to find a way to revive the strategy game Terra Battle, which was released for phones in 2014, but is no longer playable. For some reason, Sakaguchi is not interested in bringing his older games or franchises to modern platforms unless they're old mobile games, I guess, like Fantasian and Terra Battle, which I've never heard of either. I don't know, understand why. Lost Odyssey, for example, is a pretty big cult classic, right? I've only ever heard positive things about it. I've not personally played it myself, but I remember being super captivated by the trailers back in the day when this shit was on TV all the time. I always I want to play this game and just never got around to it for some reason. Plus, Lost Odyssey is one of Mistwalker Studios' highest rated games. It's not their highest because I think the last story is a little bit higher, But in terms of like the critical reception of their games, Lost Odyssey is pretty up there. And actually, speaking of Last Story, similar to Lost Odyssey, that was a game made by Mistwalker for a specific platform, right? Last Story is made for the Wii. I don't know if you can buy it digitally on modern Nintendo platforms. I have no idea. But like Lost Odyssey was made for the 360. You can still buy it on like Xbox One and Series X and S or whatever. But those obviously would be nice to have the game on other platforms and not just specific to Xbox. But when it comes to Blue Dragon, that is actually a Mistwalker game that I have played. I remember being interested in this game, I think mostly because of the art style, because it reminded me of Dragon Quest, which at the time I didn't know that, Akira Toriyama was the one doing like the art of Dragon Quest and the art of this game as well. But I assume that's probably why I got it, because it reminded me of like Dragon Quest 8. But I think I also was interested in the fact that it was an Xbox 360 game that required 2 discs. At the point that Blue Dragon came out, we weren't like super far into the life cycle of the 360, so having an RPG that required more than 1 disc, I had to get it. And I assume I probably got it for that reason, because it reminded me of like the earlier Final Fantasy games, right? Like 7, 8, and 9, where you gotta like pop multiple discs in as you play through it. And it's kind of funny that, back then I didn't know that it was Sakaguchi, right? That it was Mistwalker. It was the creator of the Final Fantasy franchise that was making Blue Dragon and making Lost Odyssey. I think it kind of sucks that, Sakaguchi's not interested in bringing these games to modern platforms, right? Because Blue Dragon, I don't know how like popular it was or how well received it was. I remember liking it for what I played of it. I don't know if I finished the game. It's been a long time. I couldn't fucking tell you. I only played through it one time, if I even finished it at all. I did fail to mention, but Blue Dragon is also an Xbox exclusive game. It was made for the 360. I believe you can still buy it as well, like digitally on the Xbox store for like Series X and S, and probably Xbox One as well. But it'd be nice to get these games on like other platforms as well in the modern era, even if it's just simply porting the games. Or you don't even have to do like a remaster or remake to Lost Odyssey or Blue Dragon. Just get them on like PlayStation and also PC. And maybe they're also available on PC through like Game Pass or some shit. I don't fucking know, dude. I don't really game on Xbox anymore at all. It's not even like Sakaguchi's against the idea of like going back to older games and bringing them to modern platforms, right? It's not like he's like looking forward, let's forget about the past type shit, because he wants to go back to Terra Battle if he can and bring that game to modern, I guess, platforms or whatever. Like mobile strategy game. And it's like, dude, come on. If you're gonna go back to older games and you want to like revive them and shit, like pick the good ones. I'm joking, of course. I don't know shit about Terra Battle, and actually looking at it on Metacritic, it's rated about the same as stuff like Lost Odyssey or The Last Story. It's like within like the 80s or like 8 point something or whatever. It's something I never really knew, and it's mostly because I never looked super into like Sakaguchi or Mistwalker, but they kind of have an obsession with making exclusive games. Like talking about Terra Battle and Fantasian, other than the new version of Fantasian, were mobile-only games, right? And specifically Fantasian, I think, was only for iOS. And then you have like Blue Dragon and Lost Odyssey, which was only for Xbox 360. And then like The Last Story was only for like the Wii or whatever. So I don't know what that's about. Like something they do, I guess. It just kind of sucks, right? With stuff like, Lost Odyssey and Blue Dragon, like it'd be cool to get those games on other platforms, but it's not the biggest deal because it's still available. I could fire up the Series S right now and buy those games if I wanted to, right? But specifically with him not wanting to come back to the Final Fantasy franchise, potentially, I think that sucks. Like, it'd be kind of cool just to have his eyes and his ears and his mind, available for some sort of Final Fantasy project, even if it's just like remakes or remasters or something. But that could change, right? Because this is kind of like a breakthrough, right? He hasn't been a part or anywhere near Square Enix for, 21 years or so at this point, but now they're helping him port his mobile game to, modern consoles, modern platforms and shit. And maybe things can change going forward. That's kind of what, sort of the kind of the focus of the video, of course, was. After more than 2 decades, you have Sakaguchi kind of reuniting with Square Enix, right, on this collaboration for Fantasian Neo Dimension. And maybe things could change going forward. We're kind of breaking the ice here after all this time, and maybe we could get Sakaguchi kind of helping with a Final Fantasy game in the future if he wants to. I completely understand if he just wants to be a consumer and be a fan, be a customer. Fine. But I do think it'd be kind of cool to have him just work on some sort of Final Fantasy project after all this time. Of course, that's pretty much the video, my dudes. Pass off to you guys. What are your thoughts on what we talked about in the video? What are your thoughts on Sakaguchi Studio Mistwalker? Do you play a lot of their games? Have you checked out a lot of their games? I'm aware of some of them, and I think the only one I'm aware of that I've played is Blue Dragon. I haven't really looked at their whole catalog. Would you like to see games like Blue Dragon or Lost Odyssey come to other platforms? And would you like to see Sakaguchi come back to the Final Fantasy franchise at some point? Anyways, that's the video. Subscribe to the channel if you guys are new. Social networks in the description below. Follow me on Twitter, @ffxiv. That's it. Bye.
Used to care what people thought, but now I care more, and nobody out here's got it figured out. So therefore, I've lost all hope of a happy ending, depending on whether or not it's worth it. So insecure, no one's perfect. We spend it with no shame. We blow that like Coltrane. We in here like Rogaine, or leave it like Cobain.